Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 6th Mama Charitable Foundation Visiting Professor in Buddhist Studies lecture series. The Center of Buddhist Studies of Hong Kong U is very grateful to the Mama Charitable Foundation for its very generous donation to us in 2012 to establish an endowment fund in Hong Kong U, which enables us to invite different Buddhist scholars to visit us each year to share with us the knowledge in their specialized fields. The theme of the lecture series this time is Buddhist Counselling and Emotion Studies. This year, we are very honored to have invited Professor Padmasiri de Silva, the pioneer and a leading scholar in the field of Buddhist counseling, to be our Mama Charitable Foundation visiting professor. Could you now join me to give a big hand to welcome Professor de Silva? He will present on the topic Embodied Cognition and Emotions, a Buddhist perspective on emotional reactivity and resilience today. Before the lecture begins, I would like to invite Professor Ian Holliday, our university's Vice President and Vice-Chancellor in Teaching and Learning, who is also the Chairman of the Management Committee of the Center of Buddhist Studies, to give the welcome speech. Professor Holliday, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and see so many people coming in for the first of these three lectures to be delivered by Professor Silva. Thank you very much. So as I was saying, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and to see so many people joining us for the first of these three lectures by Professor de Silva. I'd like to echo Carol's thanks to Mr. Leung and to the Leung family for giving us such wonderful support through the Mama Charitable Foundation. The donation came in 2012. We're now in the 6th annual lecture, bringing very distinguished scholars from around the world to Hong Kong U to expand our knowledge of Buddhist studies through the Center of Buddhist Studies here at Hong Kong U. Professor de Silva, as you can see from the sheet that's been circulated, is very distinguished indeed. There are 40 years of scholarship here. His first book on Buddhist psychology and counselling, now in its 5th edition, was first published in 1979. And he's still publishing today. His latest book on the psychology of emotions and humour in Buddhism was published this year. So this is a remarkable record, and we have a remarkable scholar with us here today. I'd just like to say that I've been living, I come from the UK, and I've been half living in Sri Lanka these last few weeks. The English cricket team are playing Sri Lanka as I speak. I think it's lunch on the second day of the test match right now, the second and final test match. I'm pleased to tell you that England have already won the series. So whatever happens in this match will not affect my feelings towards Sri Lanka. We can't be beaten in this series, but I've been glued to it all day. It's nice now to meet Professor de Silva and to know that he's brought much of that wisdom here with him. The three lectures are collectively in Buddhist counselling and emotion studies, and this is also very appropriate for us because we've just launched in 2018-19, in this academic year, our new Master of Buddhist Counselling program. So this is a new venture. We've already done. We already have one program in Buddhist studies, but this is Buddhist counselling, and it will add a new dimension to understandings of counselling here in Hong Kong and also in the wider region as we recruit students from the region and then they graduate and move back to practice in the jurisdictions they've come to us from. So this is, I think, particularly welcome that we should have somebody who's been writing about Buddhist counselling for these last 40 years, who can help us find the right direction as we launch our new program and as our new bunch of students and a new set of scholars help pilot this new program and set it on its way. So, Professor de Silva, we're particularly grateful to have you here with us. Thank you very much for joining us, and once again, thanks to everybody for being here. We have another lecture next Saturday at the same time, and we have the final concluding third and final lecture on Tuesday the 4th, also here in Rayson Huang Theatre. So good luck to everybody who's involved in this program of lectures, and once again, thank you very much for joining us to enlighten us in Buddhist counselling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Holliday. As a token of gratitude to Professor Da Silva, we have prepared a souvenir for presentation. Now I would like to invite Mr. K.C. Leung, Director of the Mama Charitable Foundation, to present the souvenir to Professor Da Silva. Mr. Leung, please. Could we have another big round of applause to Professor Da Silva? We are very grateful to Professor, with over 80 years of age now, who has come all the way from Australia to Hong Kong to give the lecture series. So thank you very much. Mr. Lam, please remain on stage. I would now like to invite Professor Holliday again to the stage, and Wenbo Hin Hong, our Center Senior Advisor, to take the group photo together. Please. The event series won't be possible without the very generous support of the Mama Charitable Foundation. And of course, our renowned speaker this time, Professor Da Silva. Thank you very much. May I invite our guests to be seated now. And I would like to invite Wenbo Hin Hong to remain on stage to introduce Professor Da Silva. Hin Hong, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for Mr. Leung for his generous donation for our Mama Charitable lecture series. And my duty here today is to introduce you to the background of Professor Da Silva. Actually, I think my duty is not necessary, but anyway, it's my duty. So I'll go through it again anyway. So I have a little PowerPoint to introduce this background of Professor Da Silva. Obviously, he did his PhD in the University of Hawaii. He is also the head and professor of philosophy and psychology department at the University of Pasadena. And he is also the Fulbright professor of University of Pittsburgh. And I think however, the most important about why he is here is that he is the pioneer in the field of Buddhist counseling and psychotherapy. He is pioneer in the sense that he basically, I think it's only my guess, he's the one that, he wrote 10 books on Buddhist psychology and counseling. The first book that he wrote, which is the most important, is the Introduction to Buddhist Psychology and Counseling Pathway of Mindfulness-Based Therapy. Now, the first edition came out in 1979. And that is the same year, the year that John Kabat-Zinn started the MBSR in University of Massachusetts. It's also called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Same year in 1979. I don't know which one came out first. But anyway, it's still mindfulness-based. It's a therapy. That's mindfulness-based stress reduction. But anyway, from the 1979, it's now in the 5th edition in 2014, and it's now a Chinese translation that was translated in Chinese in 2016. So this is now a classical textbook for Buddhist counseling and psychotherapy. And you would think, oh, 1979, well, the professor is rather senior. But although he is senior, no doubt in his academic qualification and so forth, but his latest publication was only last year. He published a book. The book on this is the best introduction to Buddhist psychology and counseling available now. And this is some of the book is full of inspiring thought-provoking strategy which promote increased self-awareness and well-being. therapists will find this book a valuable resource and certainty, in my opinion, worth investing in. So this is some of the background of the quality of his book. Now, apart from that, the professor still continued to work on new frontiers in Buddhist counseling and psychotherapy. His first book came out in 1979. In 2017, he published 2 books. And then the first one is The Psychology of Buddhism, is Conflict Studies. And then the other one is The Emotion and the Body of Buddhist Contemplative Practice, Mindfulness-Based Therapy. And then he also published one more book this year as The Psychology of Emotions and Humor in Buddhism. Now, these 2 books are also very important. From the review is that combining insight from contemporary science and Buddhist traditions, drawing on his many years of work as therapist, he showed a place of attention to the body in mindfulness-based practice aimed at emotion regulation, pain, and trauma management. And then I don't need to go on. You know the background of the professor, and it's my most, I feel the most honored, the professor here with us today. And then I should not take up any more of your time. And so please, Professor, can you please now start your lectures. Thank you very much for coming.
Greetings to all present here, and my heartfelt thank you and gratitude to the organizers of this series of lectures and symposia. I have traveled far and wide attending conferences, symposia and so on, but I would like to say this is probably the best organized series of lectures and symposia for a number of reasons. I feel that I am speaking to a group greatly interested in now the recent trends to look at Buddhism not merely as a form of liberation, but as a form of liberation as well as a form of therapy. In fact, they combine. So I'm greatly thankful, I'm overjoyed that work that I have done over the years, especially this is the book that has taken my message to so many students and with the Chinese translation. So my earlier studies were mainly at the University of Hawaii. I did a PhD on Buddhist and Freudian psychology, but later I really formally I got trained in psychotherapy and then practiced as a therapist. Now the important point about therapy is, as someone said, the client and the therapist are on a single journey. What happens to the suffering that the client undergoes, same suffering is gone by the priest. It is because I had gone through the most difficult facets of samsara, going through depression. You will find that my next essay on depression is extremely rich, because it's something that I've gone through. So this is not an academic exercise. It's a sharing of person who has gone through a long journey of struggle, fitness, separation, what the Buddha said. In fact, Sigmund Freud said, I am neither a sage nor a prophet. I am merely trying to convert hysteria into common unhappiness. That is exactly what the Buddha did. Buddha was, suffering is there. You put a label and call it depression and various things. But as Freud, Buddha was converting hysteria into common unhappiness. So all of us here, we are facing the same problem with the Buddha described as the first noble truth, dukkha. If there is no dukkha, there is no therapy. So that is the first noble truth in Buddhism as well as in therapy. Now to get to today's presentation, I am using a term called somatic intelligence, which might be new. This word somatic, it really refers to the wisdom of the body. So somatic intelligence means the body. If you go several years back to the Satipatthana, I hope there are lots of monks here who know about Satipatthana. It was in the town of Kuru that the Buddha visited the people who come to trade in the bazaar and then take things home. That is where the Buddha presented the greatest sermon of all time, and all Buddhist therapy is there. So I have gone through the Satipatthana. It's one of the most especially gurus from Sri Lanka who was trained in Burma, and that Satipatthana is a thing that every week I listen to it, I integrate it into it. So therefore, this Buddhism, which is so ancient, so many years back, is now coming to us as an aid. So for those who have not heard the Satipatthana, please go into it and then try to understand it, and it has tremendous amount of depth. So now in the Satipatthana, it divided into a number of sections. The first one is on the body, Kaya-anupassana. So Buddha realized the importance of somatic intelligence. Now somatic intelligence is a book that I wrote recently. It is dedicated to John Kabat-Zinn, Theresa Capello, and Vidyamali Birch. Vidyamali Birch did all the research, wonderful work by moving in and out of wheelchair. Theresa Capello also has an interesting story. I've been mentioned that. So when you get the word somatic intelligence, think that it is the wisdom of the body. In fact, this is what Theresa Capello said. Somatic learning provides a discipline for a new participation in life. It is a practice of awakening to who we are really are by receiving the gift of embodiment. Know what we are. So really, it is an embracing of the body. Now to get to my main talk. In this presentation, there is a focus on the role of the body, as I mentioned, in cognition and emotion. The greater focus is on emotion. Study of emotions has been my hobby. For long years, it has been my hobby because it's something that you can understand, something that you wear. Second point is that in looking at the body, we make an important distinction between reactive emotions and resilient emotions. This term resilience is at the heart of Satipatthana. Reactive emotions, when there's anger, you react. Now it was Richard Davidson, one of the most wonderful discoveries he made by using as a meditation aid Matthew Ricardo. For 3 hours a person can meditate on this. So the impact, so resilience is the new word. It is the new term. What it merely means, we don't react. Resilience, we will eventually see, is a central dimension of managing emotion in terms of the Buddhist Satipatthana. Not to oppose or suppress emotions like anger or sensations like pain. Now the final symposium, I will be speaking on pain management. So in pain management, resilience is very important. but to be receptively aware of the state of the mind and thought patterns. Kaya and vipassana, chitta and vipassana, thought patterns become important. But to be receptively aware of the mind and thought patterns and more subtle body reaction. In contemporary neuroscience, non-reactivity is a central concept. And especially in Rick Hansen has written a beautiful book recently on resilience. Non-reactivity is also a central technique in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. That was one of the earliest integration of mindfulness into Buddhist therapy by John Kabat-Zinn, Mark Williams, and they really popularized the thing. But I think what I have developed, mindfulness-based, emotion-focused therapy, is even richer. Now, emotion-focused therapy or EFT was developed by the Canadian psychotherapist Greenberg, and now it is being developed in Australia, a special institute. I was the first to use mindfulness-based emotion-focused therapy, and if you read this book, there's a tremendous amount on emotions and mindfulness-based emotion-focused therapy. Now, somatic learning has been described as the art and practice of embodied mindfulness. Embodied means you can't separate the mind from the body. So you use the term embodied. Or in simple terms, the wisdom of the body. One of my most recent books, Emotions of the Body in Buddhist Contemplative Practice, Mindfulness Therapy, goes into it. So this is pregnant with all these things that I have been talking. It's a wonderful book from the reception that I got from people. This is all about somatic intelligence. Cognition is embodied when it is deeply dependent on the features of the physical body. When a person's body beyond the brain plays a significant role from a causal or constitutive in cognitive processing. Earlier cognitive science looked at cognition in a very narrow sense, in abstraction from the body, bodily mechanisms, but in the publication of a very famous book, that was a landmark. It's called The Embodied Mind by Varela, Thompson and Rayson. Many years back, when I was visiting professor at Naropa Institute, I met Varela, the author of this, but these occurred many years back, but that was a really turning point. Embodied mind means mind and the body cannot be separated. One of the major realizations of the last few years in science has been to understand that one cannot have anything close to a mind or mental capacity without being completely embodied, enfolded with the world. My recent publication is to some extent a pioneer work on Buddhist somatic intelligence, following the trailblazer of Varela and others. Also, this work expands into applied fields like pain and trauma management, and a pioneering study of the hostility triad. I have written on what's called the hostility triad, 3 emotions. That is anger, disgust, and contempt. This emotion of disgust has hardly been discussed, including meditation. So this following Varela's work, this work is important. So now I have introduced you briefly to the meaning of somatic. Theresa Capello is the person who invented this. I'll give a short story about Theresa Capello. Theresa Capello was asked to do some artwork, a little museum for the children. But the surface was a plain rock, hard rock. So she had some instrument to dig the rock and build a playground for the children. But at some point, the iron rod that she used misfired and it went through a terrible thing. After that, she started therapy and all that, and she had a wonderful experience. She was teaching art and architecture to blind students. And she found that these blind students are more intelligent in picking up vibrative sounds. So going through this tremendous thing, Theresa Capello invented this whole. She's world famous. She's world famous, and my book is dedicated to both Vidyamali Bhatt and Theresa Capello. So Theresa Capello is the one who invented emotional intelligence. Now, why emotional intelligence? There's a famous book by Howard about types of intelligence, and he said body intelligence has been neglected. So this book is a response to Howard Gardner's work about the types of intelligence. So imagine a blind boy being very sensitive to the vibrations, person who doesn't have the full. So in that way, our sensitivity to the body or the somatic intelligence is now the crowning concept. Now to get into resilience. Resilience is of course associated with the groundbreaking work of Richard Davidson, what's called the neuroplasticity thesis. He really made it famous. Now, this study especially presents to the timely philosophy that resilient means how to grow an unshakable core of calm, strength, and happiness. Resilient people are somehow able not to merely to withstand, but to benefit from. That is, when there are stressful events, you convert them, you benefit from them, and turn adversity into advantage. That was also my experience of depression. So you see, a lot of these things, pain, depression, these things can be converted. They can be converted into something very beautiful. The answer that has emerged from my own work, that different people have different emotional styles. Davidson says, this is a very interesting book called Emotional Styles. How people vary. Emotional style of one person is different to the emotional style of the other. Some people, stress dominates. Other people, resilience dominates. These are constellations of emotional reactions and coping responses. Now about the resilient brain. Now this is one of the groundbreaking neuroscientists' discoveries. What Davidson said was, resilience is marked by left versus right activation of the prefrontal cortex. While a lack of resilience comes from the right prefrontal. So if it is the excitement of the right side of the prefrontal cortex, then it is reactive. And there is an area in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is very active. Left prefrontal cortex might inhibit the amygdala. Now the role of the amygdala is very important. Now there are lots of us who are angry, who get angry, but you deny completely. You don't know how suddenly. Now Joseph Ledoux, who has written a wonderful book on the emotional brain, gives a very interesting example. A man is walking on a forest track. and suddenly he tramples a bundle of twigs. He is able to he is trying to run away, thinking that it is a rattlesnake. Now that is, without even thinking, our automatic reflexes work. So that is why, and that is where the amygdala dominates. So if there are people who suddenly get angry, maybe they are very nice people, good people, whom we love, but sometimes they get angry, that means. Now that area is called the subliminal. Now Sigmund Freud introduced a concept called the unconscious. The Pali word is anusaya. If you know come to the word anusaya, anusaya means sleeping passions, sleeping tendencies. So that man had the emotion of fear. When you trample the twigs, you are trying to run away. So it's very important. This Joseph Leduc's book, he discovered the subliminal. But the Buddha discovered the subliminal several centuries earlier. Now, term anusaya is, you get patiga anusaya. Patiga anusaya is the subliminal tendency to anger. Raga anusaya is the subliminal tendency to passions. So like that, there are these subliminal tendencies. That is where the amygdala, neurologically, it's the amygdala that still functions. Anger mobilizes energy. Now, is anger bad? Anger mobilizes energy and shines bright light on whatever is at issue. Nevertheless, anger also comes wrapped up with tension. Lobha dosa moha. Sometimes in my early reading, I was wondering how the Buddha can reduce everything to lobha dosa moha. But now I find that more than everything, dosa is a very, very important root, emotional root. Anger comes wrapped in tension, stress, and stressful relationships. Frequent or chronic anger is fatiguing. Like hot acids, it eats away physical and mental. Of all the emotions we express to each other, anger usually compels the most attention, like a red light flashing danger. Then we react to other people's anger. Cooling down anger does not mean enabling injustice. This is a very important problem, In fact, in ethics it's called the problem of righteous indignation. That some wrong has been done. So anger should not make you very excitable and so on, but anger can be very, it does not enable injustice or turning into apathy. You can still be strong and forceful. Think of the times when you or others were determined, passionate, or assertive. This study will present the significance of the body, as I mentioned, and the emotions. Now, to get more into embodied emotion, I will discuss the concept of somatic intelligence. Then I discuss briefly I reported emotion. Now we'll look at embodied emotion. The subject of embodied emotions has received much attention in a different lineage from Buddhism. Jesse Prince, very famous, written a book called Gut Reactions. Now this book on gut reactions on the emotion of fear and love. Now I am going to give you a rider. Right? This rider or a puzzle was presented by William James. Now William James said, first you run and then you become fearful. First you cry and then the sorrow comes. First you raise your arm and then you feel anger. Now, do you feel is there any point in it, or is it putting the cart before the horse? Yes? Now think for a while. When you say you raise your arm and then you feel angry. You run away and then you feel fear. it looks like cart before the horse, but this William James theory has been rejected, revised. It has some point there. Now imagine that you are going down a flight of steps and suddenly miss a step. Then even without calling it fear, you have experienced fear. So it's a very, very interesting point, because this led to this famous theory that certain emotions are located in certain parts of the body, and the definite scientific evidence for this. So William James was the professor of philosophy and psychology at the University of Harvard. And that's the time that Anagarika Dharmapada visited them, and William James had said, please come and occupy this chair, you are more qualified to talk on Buddhism. Because William James is greatly influenced by Buddhism. So we'll see, according to the Buddhist analysis, whether there is some point in what William James is saying. Right? It looks like putting the cart before the horse. William James said, it's a paradox. First you run and then you feel fear. First you cry and then you feel sad. Though this sounds paradoxical, James was attempting to emphasize the role of physiology in emotion. Without physiology, there is no emotion. So though it sounded very paradoxical, really, he was pointing to something very important. Also, Antonio Damasio's groundbreaking research on emotion, body and neurology brings out the physical translation of the body. Now, Antonio Damasio says, these are all contemporary neuropsychologists. Now he says, think of the muscles in the face, adapting the configuration that are typical of joy, sorrow or anger. So those are reflected on the muscle. In fact, it was really Charles Darwin, that one, third topic, who really did the tremendous amount of work on emotions and facial expressions. Now, little children, if there's a little fight in the house, they will be able to say what's happening, because they are very good in reading the face of people, if it's a parent or whatever it is. So the face is very important. The face signifies various emotions. Or the skin blanching a reaction to bad news, flushing in embarrassment. Consider the body posture that signifies joy, defiance, sadness, and so on and so on. Now, the second part of this presentation is based on anger management. Now, it has been one of my hobbies, really, looking at, and not that I'm a very angry person, but I have just found it, because there were 2 or 3 famous psychologists who said that the Buddha was trying to destroy anger. Now, is that correct? That's completely wrong. So I will show you why, according to Buddhism, we don't destroy anger. As we are interested in the role of the body in emotion, and also the distinction between reactive and resilient emotion, the profile of anger will summarize what you have already presented. Looking at the physiology of anger, anger has a clear facial expression. And the normal physiological correlates are increased heart rate. We don't measure these things till ultimately you end up at the doctor or at the therapist. But if you really follow your body, clear facial expression, normal physiological correlates are increased heart rate, blood pressure, and levels of adrenaline and non-adrenaline. Now, when I went to the doctor always said that my pressure is good. I tell you, that is because I study emotions. I'm not, this is a fact, you see. So really, if you study your emotions, your pressure will be good, that means you can live long. Pressure levels of adrenaline and non-adrenaline, manifest expression of the body language, and if not controlled, results in public aggression. But as Prince observes, different emotions are not always physiologically distinct. Positive emotions are very distinct, physiological. That's the other thing. When you have positive emotion, you find the face blossoming. Compassion special. They have tremendous impact. So you find that you live through several emotions day after day, but you never think that these emotions are important. It affects your health and so on. So that is the story of the mindfulness-based, emotion-focused therapy. Positive emotions are distinct features. Anger, fear and sadness, all at great heart rate acceleration. Now suddenly you will see, like the way that man trampled a wonder, something happened to you which are very frightening. It takes a little time to find that there's heartbeat, if you are mindful. If not, you don't know till several heartbeats take you to the doctor. Anger, fear and sadness all had great heart rate acceleration, then disgust and finger. I'm not going to discuss today. It involves a form of meditation also. It's a very famous presentation made in Vienna some couple of years back. Envy, jealousy, guilt, shame, pride, loyalty and vengefulness are described as cognitive emotions. Now, there are really true traditions in body and emotions which will come during my third lecture. Charles Darwin was the first, before all the Paul Ekman and all these people went to facial expression. Charles Darwin is the person, and William James quotes from Charles Darwin. Paul Ekman rediscovered Charles Darwin. But Charles Darwin presents the somatic tradition. But if you go into Sigmund Freud, he presents the ideogenic tradition. Sigmund Freud deals with envy and jealousy, very little body play, but it's all, mind is working this way, that way. Envy. Now, this book that I have written on Buddhism and humor, lots of stuff on envy and status anxiety. But these are all creations of the mind. So, Freud had a beautiful essay on melancholy, on envy, on anxiety. So they are called ideogenic. Charles Darwin, like William James, only revived Charles Darwin. But yet envy, jealousy and shame, though they are ideogenic, envy and jealousy have submerged because when you are envious, when you are jealous, you don't know there's some tricks playing inside you. That's plenty of time. Most of the Buddhist teachings on anger have focused on its ethical aspects. Defilement, nivarana, we speak to refer to nivarana. But the psychological aspects are extremely important. Now, Buddhism on the role of mindfulness in anger management has significant implications for understanding the psychology of anger. Now, in a meditative setting focused on mindfulness practice, the concept of non-reactivity is a central consideration. Now, meditation helps you to develop non-reactivity. From the modern neurological findings, it is evident that the prefrontal cortex plays a significant role in developing non-reactivity. The regulation of the body system, balancing emotions, attitude to others, modulating fear, responding to flexibility, and so on. Daniel Siegel is another famous neuroscientist writing on this subject with a number of books. Paul Lekman, a specialist on emotion studies, says, when we are in the grip of an emotion like anger, a cascade of changes occur in split seconds. You can't even count. In the emotional signals on the face, the voice can manifest anger. Present actions, learned actions, the autonomic nervous system that regulates the body. These changes are involuntary and we do not choose them. But if we can make a choice, that is the important thing. If these things are not involuntary, if you are getting angry and you know that you are getting angry, then it's easy to handle it. Automatic appraisal, autopilot. In fact, this term autopilot is very, very famous now. So really, Vidyamali Birch discussing pain management, which is my topic that I will take last. Now in pain management, you already, pain is not just physical. Now in the Salleka Sutra, Buddha said, one man is attacked by one arrow, the other by two arrows. The man who can't withstand physical pain but has emotional pain has been attacked by two arrows. Right? So it's very important that if you go into pain, physical pain is emotional pain. That is emotional pain. And the moment there is emotional pain, there is stress. And when there is stress, there's a new ingredient coming into your system. So, mindfulness is able to break through impulsive actions reflected in the body, automatic appraisals. So that when you practice mindfulness regularly, it has to be done regularly. In fact, my guru used to say, practice. He was trained in the Vipassana tradition in Burma. I have been with him for 7 to 8 years going for a retreat. I will mention something he said later. Now, he says, try to have a special time for the meditation. Try to have a special place for the meditation. Don't try to meditate for 2-3 hours thinking that you will get close to Nibbana. Have a beautiful 45 minutes. 50 minutes, that's fine. In fact, even Matthew Ricard, famous Tibetan meditator, he says, don't let there be, the time limit has to be very productive. So, Richard Davidson has written a recent book called Emotional Life of Brain, describes those who are free of reactive responses to setbacks like depression and resignation, and having valuable quality of resilience. Now I will give you 7 points about managing anger. Anger is a paradigmatic negative emotion. Buddhism and Western psychologists accept the thesis that emotions strongly influence our lives, and that some emotions are afflictive, others are not afflictive, and negative emotions are reactive. Some ingrained states are more sticky and restrictive, locking us into old patterns of neural firing. The neural firing continuously follows the same pattern. You see the amount of people with problems in the brain today. That is when it goes a long way. So that is what the neuroscientists have found. Non-reactivity reveals an important quality of resilience. The capacity to sustain positive emotion over time is a measure of the outlook dimension of your emotion. It can be thought as the complement to resilience. Outlook reflects how long and how you can sustain positive emotion. The initial challenge of a person practicing mindfulness is not to suppress, or it is very important. And the Satipatthana, you are not suppressing, you are not repressing, you are opening up. So if there is anger, you open up, you calm down, then you find that the anger comes up. So Satipatthana never advocated that you should repress anger, that you should suppress anger, but don't be ashamed of anger. It's a human thing, and open up. That is one of the most important points in the Satipatthana. There was a very famous, like John Kabat-Zinn, therapeutic tradition called action commitment therapy. Now they said the most problematic thing comes from what is called avoidance. Avoidance therapy, if you have anger, if you try to avoid it, and go, I'm a strong man, I can be angry, or that, you are running away from it. So be humble about anger. Say that it's a part of yourself. It comes, that's okay. That is the spirit of the Satipatthana. Not to repress, not to suppress, but open up, open up. That is why the Western psychologists who said that Buddhism is destroying anger are completely on the wrong. The very famous philosopher called Flanagan. Flanagan said that Buddhism destroys anger. Buddhism doesn't destroy anger. Buddhism doesn't repress anger. Buddhism doesn't suppress anger. Open up. One can also use techniques, that is what is called Vanchaka Dharma in Pali, that is we use deception. So when you are angry, what do? We will say, you hear of some thing happening in India, some raping or whatever it is. Then you say, it's not anger, it's righteous indignation. Right? Very often, of course, sometimes it may be. It may be that this is a very difficult question. Whether morally disaster things done outside, so normally anger, but normally if you are angry at personally, something which happens to you, if you call it righteous indignation, that won't work, you see. The second strand in the management is the emerging interest in the body, in emotions, and in fact the Satipatthana comes first. Buddha says, if there is lust, see lust. If there is anger, see anger. If there is fear, fear. So really, you begin to see them. If there is anger, you don't see it as anger, then there's a problem. Right? So it's like advice to a small child when you really go into it. Richard Davidson, Daniel Siegel, and Rick Hanson. Rick Hanson wrote a beautiful book called The Buddha's Brain. That's nice for those who are interested in neuroscience. Buddha's Brain by Rick Hanson is useful. Thirdly, Buddhist contemplative part, access to the body through vipassana. Now this is important. This is the more difficult part. Now what is vipassana meditation? Now my guru for 7-8 years given a very simple formula. Now when you meditate, when you take the breath in, it touches the lips, we'll say. Now that is solidity. Right? That is solidity. When I just give you that one minute. Yeah, yes. According to the Buddhist practice, there are vibration patterns, right? One is patavi. Patavi is roughness, smoothness, heaviness. Vayu, basically when you inhale and take out, Vayu is expand and contract. This is not in order, this is from a later page I'm reading. Contract. Tejo, hot and cold, Apa, fire and splitting. Now this, if you practice this, as you practice the meditation, if you concentrate, now when the breath of air takes, you know that there's air. When it touches, there's softness. So there can be heat. Now, if you really convert this meditation into these 4 elements, dhatu, 4 elements, if you practice this for a long time and efficiently do, it works very well. It works very well. It works very well. And in fact, there is a very higher stage of attainment where you have piti and sukha. That is called kaya sakkara pasambhayam. Now in this book, the highest Buddhist stage is described, that is kaya sakkara pasambhayam means the body, the sankara, bodily sankara, quieten down, settle down. Now this is a very high stage in the practice of meditation. Third is the Buddhist contemplation path, vipassana meditation, found in the concept of anindriya patipaddha jnana or non-sensory consciousness. I follow Venerable Dhammajiva's interpretation of insight meditation based on the 4 elements. When you are immersed in observing the in-breath and the out-breath, the focus is on the draught of air rather than the breath. Basically, the element of air will touch the surrounding nose or the lips. So that is the point of touch. That is solidity. And the point at which one rubs the nose, that is ignition, hot and cold. Liquidity is perhaps found in many points. So these 4 elements gradually emerge as their vibration patterns. Degrees of looseness, tightness, expansion, contraction, hot and cold, dry and cold, and so on and so on and so on. So this is a little difficult, but as just mentioned, it has to be done under the advice of a guru. Then the other one is the last one in the Satipatthana, Dhammanupassana. That is, we will say anger. You can convert anger into an object of meditation. Now that is called Dhammanupassana. Now that's a very higher way of dealing with negative emotions. So then you look at anger, then you know that your personality is involved, then you know how it comes, so on. So Dhammanupassana, a meditative technique which makes the negative emotions the object of consciousness. Venerable Gnanaponika was my earlier guru, the celebrated German monk. He was probably on the path towards being an Arhat. Now he has a wonderful book on the Satipatthana. Gnanaponika says one does not react to these defilements. With a little magic, they can become the objects of contemplation. It's a little bit of magic. So anger becomes really a resource. It becomes something which can be useful. The celebrated, the 5th dimension is of course very important. Sila. Now, you may be expert meditator if you neglect your sila. That's all. You can't proceed, Sila is very important. Sila, in simple terms, means the 5 precepts, With it, you can go long way with that. I mean, it's okay. There may be breakages, there may be some mistakes and so on. but it is important. So anger management, this ingredient of, so this means samvara. Samvara is trained. You need a lot of samvara. In fact, the Buddha says some can be dealt with by samvara. Abandoning once they have emerged is pahana. Developing positive emotions is bhavana. Stabilizing the positive once they have emerged is anurakkhana. That's a very beautiful way of, that is, you take these sila, things which might break your sila, so you should have samvara, restraint and control. Abandoning what they have emerged is pahana. Developing positive emotions is bhavana. Stabilizing positive emotions is anurakkhana. It's beautiful, So that's how you deal with the sila. That's the ethics. Thus we see the emergence of coordinated sensibility. So the Flanagan and all these people who said Buddhism destroys anger, you find that they are completely on the wrong track. Even the ethics is very deep. Today there are so many books on ethics, but this simple, how to handle your samvara. The 6 dimensions is the user-specific antidotes. Now a very famous philosopher called Spinoza said, an emotion cannot be restrained or removed unless by an opposed and stronger emotion. Now that is sometimes important. That is like giving medicine. So if we have anger, we try to develop compassion, right? If we have envy, now in this book on humor, I have discussed a television play called Status Anxiety, right? A beautiful film. Status anxiety means envy. This doesn't happen in all parts of the world, but especially in areas like Sri Lanka, this happens. When you go to the Middle East and come, and you find that there are differences in one family and the other family, and there is a little comparison. Probably it happens all over the world. So envy is a very destructive sort of thing. And there cannot be envy. Anger feeds a lot of other emotions. Envy is one. Envy is anger. Jealousy, you cannot have jealousy unless there is anger. Right? So, anger is like a vibrant going into all this. You cannot have envy unless there is anger. You cannot have jealousy. Now, in Pali, they use only issa for jealousy and envy. They are two different things. But in Pali, jealousy and envy, there is only one word. Now, envy is different from jealousy. If you look carefully at anger, you will see that it contains aspects of clarity, focus, and effectiveness that are not harmful in themselves. So in anger, people who get angry sometimes, they are very sharp. They are focused. They are not hiding this way, that way, but straight to so long as they don't get angry. Likewise, desire has an element of bliss that is distinct from attachment. Pride has an element of self-confidence that does not relapse into arrogance. So if you have pride, which is not arrogance, it's okay. There is also what is called admirable envy. If there's a good artist, and if you are also an artist, if you say your paintings are beautiful, I like them, there's no envy. That is admirable envy. Which wherever anger comes, that is why you have taken anger. Anger is like a all-purposive thing, it creeps into all the other things. You can't make lots of emotional mixtures have anger as the ingredient. Envy, jealousy, status anxiety. And envy entails a drive to act that in itself is not deluded. as it will later become with the effective jealousy. If you are able to recognize these aspects that are not yet negative and let your mind remain there without drifting into the destructive, then you will not be troubled and confused by these emotions. This process is not easy, but what you can cultivate. So that is why emotions are important. If you cultivate the emotions, if you deal with them, and if you are sensitive, if you are mindful, because how many emotions come during a day if you keep a little diary and make a note of it. Now, number 8 is a more complex way of looking at anger. My study of the dialectical patterns, I wrote a book called, it's now used for management studies, called Conflict Studies. Now, this is based on a theory of therapy called dialectical behaviorism. Very difficult to understand. Now, if you really read Tolstoy's Crime and Punishment, the hero there kills a money lender, and he has this, but a girlfriend helps him, and he develops at times compassion. Now, in him, there is compassion, there's anger. There's compassion, anger. Now, dialectical behaviorism think that is very rich. That is very rich. That can, so really, especially according to the Tibetan tradition, compassion and anger can live together. So this is a very difficult point. The dialectical patterns. That is why sometimes some of the terrible criminals, there's something, some beauty somewhere, you see. So dialectical behaviorism was developed especially to deal with very extreme cases, and they had some wonderful results. It's not something that I appreciate, but and this term dialectical is also used in Zen Buddhism. Now, my book on humor, there are a lot of stuff on Zen. Now, they also follow this. Dialectical means opposing, conflicting. So, that is a very difficult area. So, anger, number 8 is the most difficult about anger and the dialectical behavior theory for relation between anger and compassion is more intricate way of looking at anger. Tibetan Buddhism describes the perspectives as moving through paradoxes, how compassion may mingle with sadness. It's very interesting, this. And now towards best time. Now, compassion is basically oriented towards human suffering and calls for a warm-hearted concern for both one's suffering and that of others. As indicated in my lecture on pain management, that's not here, struggling through one's own pain and caring for it develops resilience and confidence that you can manage your own pain. And as a therapist, my personal experience was transformed into caring for others. So caring for others, compassion. As a therapist, in fact, when I was being trained as a therapist, I had to do several case studies and then write a report. And so my supervisor said, even if you know very little therapy, there is something that you have which is enough, that is compassion. If you do not have compassion, then, other thing is, if you have compassion, you are sort of, you widen. I mean, therapeutic situations, you've got some very interesting stories about anger. I will tell you a few things I have already almost just one instance. There was a client who came to me who had lots of anger. But this one is not saying anything about it. Then I got his wife also to come, and the wife was listening. And when they went back, then the person, next day, the person said, "Now I don't think I will get angry because I have changed." He said, "Not that you have changed, your wife has changed you." So you see, and he was laughing at anger. That very often when people have anger, they don't want to accept it. He was laughing at his own anger. So now to come to the concluding section, according to an analysis made in this study, the use of mindfulness is not to oppose or suppress destructive mental states, especially emotions, but to see this is the important thing. This is dependent origination. To see the emergence, arising, and passing away. So when you have anger, when you meditate, when you meditate, sometimes it's a terrible thing, or you have to do this for 1 hour or something like that, and then, the moment some anger comes, see it as rise, movement, shake. So anger is just a sensation. So see them as emergence, rising and passing away. There are many obstructions for dealing with negative emotions. And I have presented 8 dimensions. I have really given you about 7 to 8 techniques of handling anger for this complex task, including deep reflective and contemplative. Developing the contemplative, piti, sukha and so on, that's a long way. It's a long way, but if you, then what really happens is, kaya sankara pasambhaya means this body, somatic tendencies, they slow down. So even for 1 hour, 45 minutes, if you can sit and then the body becomes tremendous kaya sankara pasambhaya, something like that. That's a great way to go, but those things are fairly comes under a lot of practice. Now, the last thing is the most difficult. That is, there is a theory which is not completely. I have a friend called Bruno Cayun in Tasmania. Now, he has developed a theory called that these emotions are related to various parts of the body. And this is a little more sophisticated than what my guru presented as the 4 vibration patterns. Now, Bruno, who developed the theory of mind, he called it mindfulness integrated or CBT. He has a very big clinic and prosperous practice. He's a very close friend of mine, and then we correspond and so on. His farmer developed the engine that I had developed. He's very, very modern. Now he considers thought and bodily, he says thoughts and bodily sensation, they come together. You don't separate. So that's his theory. Strikes new ground on the relation between emotions and the body. In a penetrating analysis, he says, body sensations are neither physical nor purely mental, and are considered as a link between mind and the body. Now, that's another way of looking at it. I was talking of somatic intelligence and so on. Now here, they consider body sensations are neither physical nor mental, and he found in his regular work that different emotions were associated with different patterns of the body. Now this is really experimental work. It's not and these emotions are culturally universal. Objective observations indicate that emotions are made up of combination of thoughts, bodily sensations, and the need to react. As these patterns emerge rapidly, it is not possible for the untrained mind to separate the emotional event into basic components. The emergence of emotion starts at the preconscious level of information. Right? Like that man who trampled the bundle of wigs, you are not aware. So it starts there and it remains subconscious or subliminal. So that's very important thing. So that things like envy, if you are moving in some place together towards one, you might have envy, but you don't know. You don't know because it's so subtle. Now we get to something profound which takes us to a very important facet of vipassana meditation. The four elements as vibratory patterns have been the focus of a regular meditation practice. That has been a part of regular meditation practice. And which has been presented by Dhammajiva. I am delighted that Keyun says that there are four basic patterns, characteristics of body sensations. He refers to mass from the lightest to the heaviest, motion from the most still to the extreme shaking, temperature from the coldest to the hottest, fluidity or cohesiveness. So this is a little different from Dhammajiva, but anyway, the important thing is emotions have strong links with the body. That is, of course, somatic intelligence. And as to whether parts of a body, parts of sections of the body can be traced to different emotions, it's a thesis which has been presented, but Keyun says anger will tend to maintain itself with the predominance of increased temperature and motion, increased heart rate. If a person reacts, there is venting or suppression, there is sadness. So like that, he takes various emotions. It's a controversy, but anyway, leaving that aside, somatic intelligence indicates that the body and the emotions are very, very much linked. Now, if you take anger or sadness, they come on the face, not merely on the face, they are linked to and especially the brain. Brain is very active. So all these things together show that what I call somatic intelligence also gives very, very important indication into the nature of emotions, the body and the emotions. So that's basically, since there are just a little more time, I don't know how many of you will be coming for that. Last time on pain management, they have discussed quite a lot of these things again. Now, what is important in pain management is the emotion. Now, they have found after experiments that if you have pain and if you are complaining, movement to movement, then there is stress. When there is stress, there is a firing of some new chemical into the brain. So you see, so that is why the emotional dimension is very much related to managing pain, which is my last talk on the symposium. So emotions play a very important part in the pain management, and this has been found after lots of work that has gone into it. And the other person who is very well known for pain management is Vidimali Birch. Vidimali Birch had a car accident, had a several accidents. Ultimately, she does all this work in a wheelchair. Now, her book, what she has presented, is tremendous. It's tremendous, but that shows from the study of emotions, you can get into pain management, you can get into trauma management. So the lesson that I have given you today is extremely important. Next day, I'm going into a different kind of emotion, which a lot of people have, but they don't know. What is that? Depression. What you have is what I call pedestrian depression. What is pedestrian depression? You find suddenly your car is not working. You find that child has fallen sick. You find that there isn't enough money in the bank to settle the bills. So depression is not merely neurotic and depression that you find in the clinic. It's not merely clinical, but it's so I have really worked out number of varieties of depression, and it's something that I have really gone through. It's a long story which you will find in this book if you read my life story. If you read this book, my life story is there. That is how I really got interested in depression, and I found that what you get is really mild depression, not very strong. And if at that moment, if you say, oh, I can master this is nothing. And if you generate a lot of optimism, you don't need any clinical treatment, you can aspire. So really, depression is really one of the most interesting things I will take it next time. And now I think I can give a little time for questions. Now, if you have questions I have asked you, write the question down so that I can...
Thank you very much for the inspiring lecture of Professor Da Silva. Could we give a big hand to Professor? Thank you so much. So now the session is open to the floor, and if you have questions, please write on the question paper, and I have a few on my hand now. So I'll ask on your behalf. So the first question is, what's your definition of mindfulness, and how to maximize yielding of the so-called mindfulness to achieve so-called therapy?
What is the definition of mindfulness? How to maximize yielding of so-called mindfulness to so-called therapy? It's a good question. Of course, mindfulness is a term that we use. Mindfulness in the Buddhist context, not in any other context, it's a simple thing, is to keep your awareness on the breath. That's where you begin, you see. If you can keep your awareness, it doesn't mean that you can forget, you can get disturbed. It's okay. If you get disturbed, say, I had a disturbance. So that is also mindfulness. Mindfulness not merely of your breathing, but mindfulness of your disturbance. If you say that I can't do this today, then you are mindful of your laziness. You see? So mindfulness, but in this practice, it's a simple thing. It's a breath in and out, in and out, in and out. Mindfulness to achieve a so-called therapy. That is, of course, what I have discussed now. In therapy, how do I use mindfulness in therapy? What I normally do is, I don't just get them to practice mindfulness. I ask them to do there are ways of practicing mindfulness. What I do is applied mindfulness. If they come with anger, Then now all this what I did today about anger, you get them to realize that you are getting angry, or you are getting angry for the reason that you don't want to admit. So what I do is, I use applied mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness, as any other famous or any good Buddhist monks or gurus, they can train you in mindfulness. But what I am discussing here is how mindfulness is applied in therapy. Now, anger is a very good instance. I brought about 7 to 8 points, how. And also the important thing is, anger comes in a disguised form. And that is in envy. You are so proud of yourself, you don't want to say that you are envious of other man's something, his car or something, his house, something like that. So anger comes in disguised. That is why anger is so important. That is why Buddha emphasized lobha, dosa, moha. Lobha is very easy to find out. It's very straightforward, right? There's a very interesting story about dosa in this book on humor. I will mention that. Adjunct, the story of the Mexican fisherman. There's a Mexican fisherman who comes daily, regularly. He sells some, takes some home, and so one day a professor of economics was there, and said, "What are you doing?" He said, I'm fishing. I half the thing I sell, other half I go home. My wife prepares a nice curry. In the evening, I take the guitar and go to the club and have a drink, and that's my day. So then the Mexican professor said, instead of having one, you work in the evening also. You double your intake. Then you can, after buy another boat. Then you can buy 3 or 4 boats, then you can go, and then you can be CEO. Now today everyone wants to be a CEO. So this man said, but what is the point? Then he said, you can go home, she will cook a nice meal, you can come, I can play the guitar. So there's no point, Now that story about the Mexican fisherman is culturally, it's applicable. There are people, of course, having some ambition is okay. So lobha is there. Lobha is there. Dosa is different. Because lobha, you can't catch the lobha, because people want some kind of drive. People want to do things. People want to improve. So that's okay. So that is why I took dosa to a great extent with anger, because therapeutically it's a wonderful emotion to tap. It has, and most of the negative emotions, like envy, jealousy, they have an element of anger. And that is why lobha, dosa, moha. Of course, moha is more complicated, but dosa is very important. Yes, any other question?
Please, could you elaborate further the Tibetan Buddhist perspective of the coexistence between anger and compassion?
Please, could you elaborate Buddhism further, the Tibetan response of the cognitive? Yes. That's a good question. Now, I got interested in this I was doing this book on conflicts, conflict studies. So the Tibetan tradition doesn't consider anger and compassion as opposed, right? But if a person is angry, it's an occasion to be compassionate, right? So really, you can always, they can exist side by side. Other thing is, you can be compassionate, but anger might mean that you are really concerned about some injustice or something like that. So that they, in a context, in a different context, it can be applied. So these are called dialectical. That's why dialectical behaviorism use this famous crime and punishment in that book. What you get is really, I have written on crime and punishment using this book, Crime and Punishment, presentation which are given during the Vesak time in Sri Lanka. Now, the dialectical behaviorism is very interesting. The same thing as what the Tibetan tradition. So when people want to oppose, they are terribly opposed, But on the other hand, though they oppose each other, but there can be something in it. So really, compassion and anger can coexist. There are other things like that. For instance, greed and perseverance. Now, you can be really perseverant, or if you are lazy, laziness can exist with perseverance. After a while, perseverance can help you to get into the laziness. These are basically opposites. They are called dialectical, because though they are opposites, they can be combined. Now, that is really what I got from the Tibetan tradition. There's a whole book on that. I don't have the reference. Okay. That's a good question. If you are interested in dialectical behavior therapy, that gives a very deep interpretation of what I said now.
Is release of embodied emotions from past trauma necessary for complete recovery? For example, defrost the body from the freezing position in facing previous threats or traumas.
Is release of embodied emotions from past trauma necessary for complete recovery? For example, defrost the body from the freezing position facing previous threats. That's quite clear. Release of embodied emotions from past trauma necessary. This is a little complicated question. Now, complete recovery, we'll put it aside for the time being. Now, embodied emotions, now this you have to go into trauma management. When you go into trauma management, which is a more difficult field, now in trauma management, the body is very, very central. In trauma management, the body is very central. So if you can handle the body, then to a great extent you can. But traumas are repetitive, very difficult to handle, and there are people who are specialized in trauma management. So what I can say is the successful trauma management is where the recovery of the body. That is, body doesn't obstruct you, body helps you, body is very flexible, very succulent, and so on. So the body has to whether body from the freezing position, release of embodied emotion. So this is really not exactly a release of embodied emotions, but it is the release of certain patterns in the body, not merely emotions. So really, there's a reorganization, recovery of the whole body as such. Emotions are only one part of it. And trauma management is the area where this is done, and that is far more complex than the pain management. In my in my book there's a little bit on trauma management. So what I can say is, instead of recovery of an emotion, but really the recovery of the whole functioning of the body.
Okay, the next question. What are causes of depression from the perspective of Buddhist teachings? And are there any methods in Buddhist teachings to deal with depression?
What are causes of depression? Good question. From the perspective of Buddhist teachings, are there any methods in Buddhist teachings to deal with depression? Right? This is a good question, and since I'm going to speak on it, I will take a little time. Now, depression has psychological facets. Depression has somatic facets. Now, if a person develops depression, his body changes. Right? So that is why I remember, personally I remember, I was asked not to give up taking the tablets. Right? So that because depression has a physical aspect when you go for treatment. Right? When you go for treatment, when you go for therapy, depression, but it's not merely the tablet. Tablet can help you a little. People take the, but the psychological treatment is important. That of course change from place to place. If you have lost one, now one very important area is on which I have written is grief. Now that is something which really has a tremendous impact on me. Separation, with separation from the loved one. Now things like that, there will be depression for some time. There will be, but you have to find, you have to convert them into something very positive. You can convert them, you can put up a library in the name of someone who lost, You can give to charity. You can do lots of things. So grief, in fact, I have a famous essay called Lost Art of Sadness. This has that essay. That was very famous essay written for the most famous emotion studies scholar who discovered the area, died at the age of 65 at the airport. So the wife, Kathleen Higgins, edited an emotional, in memory of him, a book, She really liked my essay, Lost Art of Sadness. Now that is what I'm going to talk about in the next time. So there are psychological elements, the physical elements comes if you neglect. And if you ask to take tablets and you are not taking, the somatic means body is affected. Body is affected in various ways. It's only when the brain is badly affected, then depression becomes difficult. When it runs into the brain. So depression, there are certain levels, but a very important factor is the culture. Now there's a famous culture called the Ifaluk culture. On a groundbreaking award they won. In that Ifaluk culture, one person's death is another person's occasion to be compassionate. They really work together. And they found that in that particular culture, depression doesn't come in a normal way. It's a shock absorber. So culture, now Sri Lanka, now I don't know about Sri Lanka, but in the past, traditional, during our days, Sri Lankan culture also had this. So culture plays a very important part. So if you have people to share, if you have people to talk to, if you have therapists, it's not just a mechanical one, but a very kind, compassionate one. So, what are the causes of depression? The causes of depression, I took only grief, but there can be very many causes of depression. There are people, millionaires, they ultimately they can't enjoy a meal, So there are different, that's another kind of depression. But basically, depression has psychological causes. If you can handle the psychological causes, if it doesn't affect the brain, if it doesn't affect the body and so on. So I have lots of things to say about depression, which I will, because as Sigmund Freud said, I am merely converting hysteria into common unhappiness. So that is what the Buddha did with depression. You must have heard of the Kisa Gautami story and the mustard seed, all that sort of thing I will take up next time. So, this will be really a separate lecture on this.
Okay, next question. Please teach us some method to induce compassion in our daily life and how to practice compassion to someone who are cold-blooded.
Please teach us some methods to induce compassion in our daily life. How to practice compassion to someone who are cold-blooded. I can't perform miracles, but it's like this, you see. Compassion has to be contextualized. Now, why do you want to? If you want to practice compassion on someone who has, robbed you and done all kinds of things, I remember when I was, I have a whole essay on this problem. It's called in the new book, in that moral pain. It's a very important question. Now, some years back, I was traveling through Thailand, and at the check-in point, I didn't know they had taken my money. I think nearly $1,000 or $2,000, But I had the presence of the mind, couldn't complain to anything. Just got my flight and came back, and I wrote to my guru. When I came back, I had stomach problems, all kinds of things, That time I was feeling terribly bad. So my guru says, consider it as an occasion to be compassionate. Then I asked, isn't this moral pain? I wrote to him back. Moral pain, he said, is okay if you are not compassionate, if you are trying to be compassionate to what you have lost, you see. Moral pain has to be objective. That person who robbed the thing, you can be compassionate towards him, So, compassion is difficult cases to come. Now, this chapter on moral pain goes deeply into it, deeply into what my, ultimately, later, my guru said, that was a blessing in disguise. If not, I wouldn't have written this book, So, because the moral pain, that's the time that it's very difficult to be compassionate. Very difficult. It's a good question. Sometimes you can't. Now, there are these cases in India, the raping and all that sort of thing. Now, in ethics classes in the universities, we have a problem called the problem of righteous indignation. It's not merely angry, I put in the flag, righteous indignation. Those are very complex. Now, you feel for that hundreds of people or women in India, what's happening and so on. You are angry also, but then what sort of anger it is? So like that, now a parent's anger towards the child, that doesn't go very far because there's a complete base of compassion. So if there's a base of compassion, because of my compassionate nature, later I not merely wrote this book, but I was able to integrate it into. So it's a very important question, anger and compassion. So Brahma Viharas, they bring a very important message. Okay. Thanks for that question. Only thing there's no time to discuss in detail, maybe in one of the other.
May I ask, how can you help or assist another person who is angry or sad while they themselves consider it not important?
May I ask, how can you help or assist another person who is angry or sad while they themselves consider that it is not important? Of course, we'll use sadness aside for the moment, because they're different. Because anger, now the important thing, now the client that came to me was a person who lost his job. And when I told him, if you want a job, don't get angry, he laughed. He laughed. But then I began talking to him, and I said, go to the employer and ask for a certificate. He said, no, you don't do. He started doing that. And after about 2 or 3 sessions, he's saying, I think I had a lot of anger. So, that realization, and that other person who said that his wife has changed, he said, it's not that wife has changed, you have changed. So you see that anger, we don't realize it. But if you realize it, if you can laugh at your own anger, laugh at your own limitation, then anger can... sad is different. Sad I will discuss when I take depression. That's a very difficult issue. So sadness is a very difficult issue. But anger is not that difficult because anger has a lot of negative elements. Yeah, if they are not, the other part is, now in my client, he didn't consider it as important. But later, you know what he did? He got trained in a new job in nursing. And he won a medal also. So you see, now he was so despondent about losing the job. So go to the employer, get a certificate, change yourself, be flexible, live and let live. Have that. And say that there are so many people who lose their jobs and so on. So that anger is very little by little. When anger is there, it's very difficult to do it. So like that, though they themselves don't consider, you have to make them aware. Sati, it's a sati. And also, if you are denying your anger, that's terrible. The Buddha says, see anger as anger, see sadness as sadness, see lust as lust. So you have to realize it's anger, and you have to realize that it's only going up, and then gradually find lots of alternative ways of handling it, right? Now you will say you fall out with a friend, angry. Then you want to, you give him a call and say, come for a cup of tea or something like that. So like that, you have to use some on-the-spot techniques when you have anger, and that's not difficult. Okay.
I was wondering if there is any correlation between Buddhist perspective of anger and the concept of libido in Freudian psychology.
I was wondering if there's any correlation between Buddhist perspective of anger and the concept of libido in Freudian. Yeah, I have my PhD thesis was on this, on Freud and Buddhism. What I have done is, in Buddhism you get 3 forms of tanha: kama tanha, bhava tanha, and vivaha tanha. Right? This has some parallels to Freud's libido, which is like the kama tanha. Freud's ego instinct, which is like the bhava tanha. And the most controversial, vibhava tanha. it would be nice if you ask some of the Buddhist monks especially, what is Vibhava Tanna? Vibhava Tanna is a neglected this thing. So here, anger and the concept of libido in Freud, so the anger comes in Vibhava Tanna. Vibhava Tanna means when you take a person who is taking alcohol, right? Taking alcohol, he knows that when he sees the bar, he can have another drink, but he takes it. He's like as the demon has taken away, knowing that it is bad. Go on. But that is Vibhava. Self-destructive, the love of self-destructive. People, that is my interpretation. There are very many. And it is Freud also called the repetition compulsion. You know, Freud saw his nephew, grandchild, playing a game. He had taken a little piece of wood, tied it to the string, and putting it under the bed and taking out, taking in and taking in out. So Freud said, what are you doing? His mother had left him and gone to the shops. So that was very, he couldn't bear it up, so he was mastering. Now, Freud called it the repetition compulsion. That man who goes to the bar, though he doesn't like it, repetition compulsion. So that is how the destructive tanha works. Libido is more like the kama tanha. Bhava tanha is the egoist thing. And part of them come at an unconscious level. I will try to send a copy of that thing to your library, you know. The Buddhist and Freudian psychology, it's gone through several editions and it's here. So that question is very important. Then one more. Freud had a concept called a beautiful paper he wrote called Narcissism. Have you heard the story of Narcissus? Narcissus is a young youth who used to see his shadow in water, and he was so full of self-love. I am beautiful, I am this, I am that. And because of that he died. That's the story. So narcissism, Freud picked up from that thing, the paper on narcissism is very Buddhistic, egocentrism. In fact, when I started this, those people, they never thought that I'd be able to do this, you know, but at the same time, there's a book which all of you must read called Thought and the Thinker. Thought and the Thinker, now I'm trying to think of the author, very famous man, Thought and the Thinker. Now there, he says, Freud later, earlier he used the method of hypnotism. Second, he used the method of free association. Thirdly, he used the method which is very Buddhistic, listening and so on. So there you get some very interesting Thought and the Thinker. I can't remember the name of a very famous person. It's a lovely book to read. And he really rediscovers Freud. So the libido, the concept of libido is kama-tanha, but the more beautiful one is the narcissism, egocentrism. And vibhava-tanha, I've done a lot of work on, in this book you will find. Kama-tanha, bhava-tanha, in this book I have discussed that. So, so that is about anger and libido and its place in Freudian psychology.
Okay, this one is wrong, huh? Since Buddhism is about karma and samsara, it is conceivable that many Buddhists believe in those so that they practice meditation and contemplate the Buddhist teaching to act ethically every day. My question is how to convince people to believe in karma or samsara. Most importantly, how to convince those people who may not believe in the Buddha to practice mindfulness and convince them that it can really help reduce our suffering.
So I'll try to finish up soon because since Buddhism is about karma and samsara, it is considerable, it is conceivable that many Buddhists so that they practice meditation and contemplate the Buddhist teaching is to act ethically every day. My question is how to continue people to believe in karma or samsara. Most importantly, how to come to those people who may not believe. Practice mindfulness and that I can. You know, this problem about karma and river, very complicated issues. Some of the best minds, in fact, a philosopher whom I relish, on whom I have written, is Jiddu Krishnamurti. Beautiful, doesn't touch karma, doesn't touch rebirth. It is not necessary to get entangled in, it's from the Buddha plea, it is a part of the doctrine. But there is no need. Buddha also had said, don't indulge in being and becoming. Don't calculate. This is going to make me an alapa. So you have to have a very restrained, mature attitude to karma. Karma, of course, just means the results of actions. But something like Krishnamurti has been one of my favorites. During my university days, when I had problems, I studied Krishnamurti. I have a book called Explorers of Inner Mind. Ultimately, he messed up his personal life. If not, he was meditating with this Anand Maitreya. They used to meditate together. So you see, this is a difficult question, karma and rebirth. It's a part of the doctrine. If you take out that doctrine, Buddhism falls. But you can yet not get too much involved in it, right? In fact, the more you calculate, the less you get. That's the paradox. If you calculate, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, then there's problem. So the thing is to take it as a part of the doctrine. And the best thing is to go on. And of course, if you have a guru, then you can see whether there are improvements in your life and so on. So it is, of course, karma has a lot of meanings. Karma has a lot of meanings. One is the results of actions and so on. This is a difficult area. And it's a part of the doctrine. We accept it, but we don't get too much into it. So that's really, I don't know that to satisfy you, but that's really what. It's a part of the doctrine. I mean, it's always there. It is always there, and it gives a good rationale. When if you take Christianity with belief in God and so on, so this is a different thing. It's a rational explanation. It is possible, it's happening. So there's nothing wrong with it, but the only thing is one should not get too much into it.
Okay. What bring your interest to combine Buddhism with emotional therapy?
What brought your interest to combine Buddhism and emotional therapy? It's a long story because in my studies I was greatly interested in mathematics and all these physics and various things. And through my literature, I was greatly interested in literature, and when you go to novels and fiction and all that sort of thing, I found that this. Then, of course, I found that in my limited psychology studies, that emotion was very important. And of course, the real turning point was my experience of depression, which took me to counseling. After PhD in philosophy, it took me to counseling because unless you have experienced that, then of course I have cultivated this and so on. But it was my interest in literature. I think good literature can be combined with therapy. Very good literature. Not this useless stuff, but there's some very good literature coming from time to time. And I was really interested in English literature. And psychology was just a sideline. And then, of course, I got into this. So, yes, so that's really what I can say. That has been my hobby, and it has been there, and it continues. It has made me, every point in time, just 1 minute, emotions have helped me. I remember I dropped at University of Singapore many years back, coming from a conference, and they said, we have 1 day for a talk, can you give? So I talked on emotions, and they asked me, can you come next year? I found that the study of emotions I had done was very fruitful, very good. And there also, I had a completely workshops on emotions. And so like that, now even here, my coming here was partly due to my interest in emotions. So that will be there till I leave, maybe even later. Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor. Sorry that we don't have time to answer all the questions this time, but maybe we save some for the next time. Okay, so could we have another round of applause to Professor De Silva? Thank you so much. Professor will offer 2 more public lectures in the coming 2 weeks. The next one will be held next Saturday with the theme Understanding Depression and the Lost Art of Sadness, Issues in Depression and Grief Counselling. So please don't miss it, and we hope to see you again, same time, same venue, next Saturday. And we are now serving some vegetarian refreshment outside the hall. Please enjoy. Thank you for coming, and have a nice evening.